Hey, welcome back to the Football Die podcast. So the England squad obviously being announced prior to the World Cup. We're going to go through it quickly just to get our take on each of the positions, all the contentious ones, all the people that made it and those that didn't. And I've got John, Dave and Miles with me as well, just to see what they think about it as well. So I'll start with the forward line, I think. Harry Kane's obviously the obvious name going to Qatar. I don't think there's any way he could not make it. We've got Callum Wilson there instead of Ivan Toney and potentially even Tammy Abraham. So that's the first place I'll start. Dave, what's your thought on the forward line? Is that enough? And is he seeing Rashford as a potential extra striker if it came to it?
Yeah, there's a bit of a risk there. I think you mentioned there, Rashford is probably the third backup striker. And we've seen him actually use Sterling sort of as like a false nine, as a striker, as a forward as well. So I don't think there's a lack of options there. Obviously, as a true number 9, there's only two real true number 9s in Callum Wilson and Harry Kane. So hopefully they can stay fit, touch wood. And I was thinking
that. Go on, such a delay with you. Go on, Dave.
The only thing I think for me that is a bit worrying is that a lot of players for England just don't play as well for England as they do for their teams. I mean, you look at the likes of Sterling at Man City last year. He was obviously performing a lot better. I just feel like that's because every player in that City team is a system player. And you look at Foden as well. He's not played anywhere near well enough in that England team as he has done for City. So that's the only worrying thing for me, is whether they can actually piece it all together. And the evidence that we've seen so far, obviously in the most recent game, suggests no. So we've got for me, we're going to have to hope for it to miraculously all come together, whatever front line they put in there. There's so many options. Obviously, we're not even mentioning Saka yet. Grealish as well. Both can play off the left. So it'd be interesting to see who does start. For me, I would probably play either Sterling or Rashford on the left if we're playing Foden on the right, just because I don't feel as though Foden and Grealish can really play together. They're too similar in the way that they play. We need somebody who can kind of run channels and make those runs in behind.
It's interesting to note that he's picked Callum Wilson as because I didn't have him as the direct replacement for Harry Kane necessarily, Miles. Did you? Because I thought Toney was probably a better fit as a replacement for Kane. It's a bit more physical, isn't he? Are you disappointed not to see Toney as well as or instead of Wilson? And could you ever have seen Tammy Abraham having his chance at this World Cup?
It would have been Tammy Abraham, I have no doubt about that, but his form has just not been good enough this season. He's only got 3 goals this season, and it's a massive drop-off compared to last year. Southgate said it himself, his barren run came at exactly the wrong time. It was interesting to see Southgate make comments on Tammy Abraham's form and that keeping him out of the squad, but overlooking that when it comes to other areas, but we'll talk about that later. I think it was always going to be one of Wilson or Toney. Calvert-Lewin's so far out of the conversation now, so really it was down to those two. Watkins is a different kind of forward, and although we've seen him in the England squad lately, probably wasn't going to make the cut after his time under Gerrard. So when it came down to those two, it's a flip of a coin. I honestly think they're both very, very good strikers in good form right now. Wilson's playing at a team that are now 3rd in the league. The only worry with Wilson is his fitness and his injury record. You've always got to have that in the back of your mind. And if Kane picks up an injury in the first game of the tournament, can you rely on Wilson to play that much football in such a short space of time without picking up an injury himself before you are looking at Rashford as sort of the third option? And also, Toney's penalty record. I know it seems a bit specialist to even think about that, but England, you have to think about what happens if you get to penalties, and there is no one, I include Harry Kane in that I would want to take a penalty more for England than Ivan Toney. So he can feel hard done by, but Wilson's earned his place. So I'm not going to be mad at Southgate for the decision, really.
No. Plenty of attacking options to narrow down, and a lot of them have picked themselves. I think Gareth Southgate has picked 20 out of the 26 that went to Russia, I think. So, or at least to the Euros, actually, I think it was. So, yeah, he's got a very familiar-looking squad. Phil Foden, Jack Grealish, obviously, going to be there. Marcus Rashford, Bukayo Saka and Raheem Sterling, all kind of stalwarts of a Southgate team. And then James Maddison's found himself in the squad. And again, the timing of this World Cup has meant that some players have been rewarded for their form at this stage of the season, whereas in the summer, it might have looked a little bit different. It's really interesting to see. But James Maddison then, John, what's your take on his inclusion in the team? I think a lot of people are seeing him as like the Jack Grealish figure from last year, aren't they? He's the one they really wanted to see as like a wild card, bit of an unpredictable number 10 sort of player. Can he have a role? Do you think you will see much of him at the World Cup?
When we were talking on the pod earlier, and I mentioned about players coming in for maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes if we need to win a game, I think that unfortunately he'll kind of end up filling that role. Like a lot of players, I'm pretty confident Southgate will go for his kind of stalwart team that he picks nearly all the time. And as you mentioned with the Euros, it's only been 18 months since then. 20 out of the 26 are the same players. I would love to see a little bit of a change on the back of the results and things that we've had. And Maddison, for me, would fit into that quite nicely. I think he's electric. He's had a fantastic, not even just the last, few months of this season. He was brilliant last season as well. As one of Leicester's most consistent players. I think he's actually got quite a lot to his game as well. It's not like a one-trick pony. When you used to look at someone like Sterling for a lot of pace and cutting inside, he's got a much more well-rounded game. He's actually quite quick as well. When I've been watching him Leicester West Ham at the weekend, I didn't realise how much pace he's actually got. I thought he was a bit slower than that. So he's super, super versatile. And I mean, he's never going to play like the Rashford role where he can move into like a proper up front. But I mean, if we're really struggling, they could look at doing like 3-5-2 with him playing off if they want to try something a bit different. So there are options there. And he's one of the players that you can't argue that deserves a place on the plane. So I think it's fantastic. I'd like to mention a tweet that he put out as well the other day around his footballing career. And a teacher said to him, to be a footballer is like being 1 in a million. And he said, I am that 1 in a million. That's quite nice.
Yeah, I saw that from about 2013 or something. Yeah, he kind of saw it coming, didn't he? So much confidence, and I think that is a blessing and a curse in some ways. But I think in international football, it's not a bad thing at all. But the England midfield is strangely predictable as well. Jude Bellingham is in great form, so he's included. Conor Gallagher's had an indifferent start to his Chelsea career so far since he's come back from loan. He's in the squad. Jordan Henderson keeps getting picked. Mason Mount, again, is another one of those up and down midfielders. He's in the squad. Declan Rice is in, and Calvin Phillips, who has played, 45 minutes of football this season. Yeah. So some tried and trusted names, and then Conor Gallagher as well, who seems like the midfield wildcard, if you like. What do you make of the midfield, Dave?
We could easily be short, couldn't we, if a couple of players were to get injuries. The only thing that is for me, there's a couple of players in there who could make it so he could actually experiment a little, but Southgate being the manager that we know he is, he's not going to do that. I do feel as though Maddison offers something completely different. We've now got obviously that holding midfielder in Rice, which we've long been looking for as England fans. We've probably not had it since the times of Gareth Barry and Michael Carrick when he couldn't even get in the England team. So now that we have, I just like to see him just be a bit more adventurous. I don't see what the harm is in just having a more attacking two in midfield. We've got Jude Bellingham. He can do it all. He's got such a well-rounded game. Maddison's so well improved this season in his defensive. We've seen him trying to trek him back. He's been pressing, and I'd just like to see him just do something different. And it only seems like we start to attack is when we go behind in the game, which obviously that's why I doubt that we'll, kind of go progressive from the beginning. But I'd like to see Maddison as maybe an 8 in a midfield too, alongside Bellingham. I just think that would be really interesting.
Midfield then, Miles. Are you looking at that and thinking the same as Dave? It's a bit light. Like if there's an injury to one of those two players, either Declan Rice or Jude Bellingham, it's going to look like there's not many like-for-like replacements, or at least not of the same quality. Are you worried at all by the midfield?
Yes, but I don't know what else he could have done, because you look at that list and there isn't anyone that's missing either. That's the other thing that really stood out to me. You could maybe have had James Ward-Prowse in there, but really, other than set pieces, is he good enough at that sort of level? Probably not. I saw a lot of Villa fans knocking about, well, maybe Jacob Ramsey could have had a call-up. It's early for him. He's not really done enough yet. You have to take someone like Conor Gallagher because, really, short of him, Loftus-Cheek, I don't know. England aren't blessed with a wealth of midfield talent right now. They have an obvious three that pick themselves for me. It's got to be Rice, Bellingham, and I'd play Mount in midfield because say what you will about Mount and his form for Chelsea lately. I don't think he's ever let England down. I think he works incredibly hard. He's a good tournament player. Southgate clearly really trusts him. I think that's the player that fills the role for me. That's why Calvin Phillips is there. He's not played much, but if Rice gets an injury, he slots in. That's why Henderson is there because he is experienced at that tournament level. You know my feelings on Jordan Henderson. I think he's a terrible footballer. I don't think he's having a good season for Liverpool, and we've taken him to the World Cup again. But to give Southgate a bit of slack, I don't think he's missing anyone either, and that's a difficult position. And that could be the area that costs England. We've got two, I would say, genuinely, and you'll like this, John, I'd say we've got two world-class midfielders in Jude Bellingham and Declan Rice. I really think they're that good. But that's light. It's not a lot.
Yeah. It's not a lot when you're trying to shuffle the pack and you're chasing the game or fatigue kicks in. You need to bring on fresh legs. You don't bring on Jordan Henderson for fresh legs or Calvin Phillips for fresh legs, do you? They've not played many minutes.
Maybe for game management you do, though. If all of a sudden in a knockout game I'm 1-0 up and I need someone who's going to come on, just commit a couple of fouls, tell Jude Bellingham where to run, then maybe that is why Henderson is there, as much as I loathe to say it. Like, there is a role to be played in tournament football by players like that. And you have to work with what you've got. Southgate's done that in this area. I think he's missed some opportunities in defence and in the forward line. But in midfield, there's not much else he could have done.
The defence worries me more, I've got to admit, and we'll go on to that next. The centre-backs, first of all. We've got Conor Cody, Harry Maguire's in the squad, John Stones, Ben White, and Eric Dyer, who's made it as a versatile kind of utility player, as either a sweeper or as a midfielder. He can play a few different roles, but I mean, Gareth Southgate loves Eric Dyer. Do you look at those centre-backs, John, and think, yeah, we're doing all right there. We're strong and we're steady at the back, and that could win us the World Cup?
I mean, yeah, there's a few brick walls in there. There's no issues whatsoever. I mean, now let's be realistic. It's like an old bucket has been left out in the garden for too long. I think our defence is going to have more leaks in it than a lot of other teams, unfortunately. And I know that Maguire historically has done quite well for England, so that's fine. You know,
let's give him his proper title, Team of the Tournament, Harry Maguire from the Euros. Come on.
Team of the tournament. But, you can't take that away from him. In fairness, some people or players do perform at that level for their country, and they just, for whatever reason, are just a bit different. They're not inconsistent. They deliver a certain level, when you're going to get from them. The problem that we have is that if he doesn't deliver that, and we've got the others that are a bit ropey anyway, because they've been massively inconsistent. You look at Dyer's most recent performance against Leeds. To be fair to him, he was played on the right-hand side for quite a lot of that as a back three. They moved him into the centre at half-time, and he actually had a better, I think it's about 55 minutes, and he had a better sort of towards the end of the game. But at the same time, it's a bit worrying as an England fan. We've got Southgate, who unfortunately seems to like playing quite passive and not that electric when we've got a lot of players that could light up the tournament. And that's the kind of concern for me. I do agree with Miles on the midfield. And I think that the defence is, but again, who else do you take? It's a similar thing with the midfield.
Plenty of people. I'll go on to that next. And I think I'm going to ask you, Miles, to kind of talk about the omissions there, because Fikayo Tomori is the big one for me, and Chris Smalling, who you've championed as well, both playing in Serie A, who seem to be overlooked by Southgate. For what reason, I don't know. Why has he overlooked those two?
There's three I would have taken. One of them, maybe you'll say I'm biased, but I'll come to that. Tomori is such a funny one because he has very limited experience with England. He was amazing last season. He helped AC Milan win the Scudetto, and that is a huge achievement for a player of his sort of age in that kind of position. And he really was vital to that. He's not started this season anywhere near as well, and his form has been poor. And we saw Southgate's comments on Tammy Abraham. That bothered him. It hasn't bothered him with Harry Maguire because he's proven himself for England a bit more, maybe. That's the only argument you could have. Southgate knows Maguire better than he knows Tomori, and he knows Southgate's system better. So I don't want to say I understand the decision and sound like I'm some sort of Southgate apologist and defending every decision he's made. I would have taken Tomori. He's better than Eric Dyer. He's better than Connor Cody. Right now, he's better than Harry Maguire. I definitely would have taken Smalling. I think if you're looking for stability, you're looking for someone who knows how to play in a back three, he's probably the best English centre-back in world football right now. I don't think there's anyone. Maybe you could argue John Stones, but what kind of defensive work does he have to do at Man City comparative to what he'll have to do for England? This is Chris Smalling under Jose Mourinho. All he does is defend. He's fantastic at it. He's really, really good. And a massive threat from set pieces. And we know Southgate loves to utilise them. Look at some of the set piece takers we've got in this squad. James Maddison, Kieran Trippier. There's some excellent dead ball deliverers there. And Smalling is getting goals for Roma as well as being defensively sound. So he should have been in over one of Cody or Dyer or Maguire too. And you have to take Tyrone Mings for me. 14 out of 16 games he's played for England, he's kept a clean sheet. He also scored 2 goals. A weird time for him under Gerrard, but I still think he's probably been Villa's best player this season. Maybe between him and Douglas Luiz. And an outstanding record. He's left-footed. He knows how to play in that England defensive line. So really, Southgate's taken 5 centre-backs. I probably would have only taken 2 of them. Maybe I'd have taken Maguire. I probably would have taken Maguire. Ben White has to start for me. Has to start. I know he's been playing right back for Arsenal, but even if he plays right back for England, I'm okay with that, if that means Trippier's left back. But I'd start him centre-back with John Stones. I think that has to be the 2. And maybe you get Maguire in there if you're playing a back 3. I don't know. It's a hard one, this one is.
I think with the wing backs going further out wide, we've got a bit more of a dependable sort of set of players there. Even though we've got a couple of really notable omissions in Reece James and Ben Chilwell. I think Trent Alexander-Arnold is good enough to be in the squad, definitely. Obviously, Luke Shaw is the only left back really now that's worth picking. I think who's in some decent form as well lately. Kyle Walker has to be in every England squad at the minute. He feels like he's one of the most key players for a Southgate team, so I'm happy to see him there. And Kieran Trippier as well brings so much other things to this squad. So in wing back, we look okay. It's just centre back where it kind of worries me a little bit more. Dave, what are your thoughts on the defence overall? You worried?
I think the first encounter we come up against a half-decent, fairly decent team, I think he'll go to a back 3. I don't think he has it in him to risk playing a back 4 against a top team for me, especially what we've shown in the last few games. We've been leaking goals with the players that we've been given an opportunity and putting in there. I agree with what you're saying there, Mark. I think Kyle Walker, as soon as he's had a few minutes, I think he'll be on the right side of the back 3. And we'll be looking to play probably Luke Shaw and probably Trippier on the right-hand side as a wing-back. And I'm absolutely fine with that. Kyle Walker's done really well for England in that position. I just think he offers a little bit of recovery if we need it when we get hit on the break. He's brilliant at kind of recovering and making interceptions. So I feel like he'll be a key player, and he's just come back at the right time. It's a big shame for me. Obviously, Reece James hasn't been able to make it. He's been the outstanding English player for me this season. So unfortunate that he's obviously not been able to make it. But I still think there's cause for optimism. I just think, and I do think England, he'll probably be doing the right thing by playing a back 3. I just don't think England are strong enough defensively to be able to play that a lot of England fans want England to play at the minute. We're just not quite there yet with the defence, in my opinion.
But none of our defenders play in a back 3 for their club sides right now. So are any of our defenders tactically smart enough to change systems at this stage in a season when they are coming straight from a season as well? That's the other thing that really worries me. Like, other than playing for Southgate once every couple of years, they don't do it.
Interesting in goal as well. The 3 most predictable ones really that he could have picked in Pickford, Pope and Ramsdale. Henderson was a shout, I think, but he's been erratic at best, hasn't he, for Forest so far this season. I was going to pick Jordan Pickford. We all know he is a favourite of his. But personally, I'd go for Aaron Ramsdale just based on confidence, I guess, from the start that Arsenal have had. But John, who are you picking quickly just to go in goal? Who would you start in the first game?
Ramsdale and Pickford over the last couple of seasons have made some absolutely unbelievable saves. And again, it's like Pickford does quite well for England. So if you're going on club form, 100% Ramsdale. If you're an England through and through, it's got to be Pickford because that's the way it always is. Personally, I'll go Ramsdale.
Miles? Any advance on that?
Newcastle have got the best defence in the league this season with Nick Pope in goal. It's the only caveat I would say. Someone that's been Nick Pope is the least erratic out of all of them. So for a tournament, I don't know whether he might be the one I trust the most. Ramsdale is probably the most talented. Pickford's the most experienced, but Pope is the most consistent. So take your pick, really. I'm actually really happy with our goalkeeper department. I think they're three very, very good goalkeepers. That's probably our strongest area of the squad. And how many international teams will go into the World Cup not knowing who their number one is because all three choices are good? That's a really good thing to be in, and they'll push each other.
Yeah, it's a position of strength that we're not really blessed with elsewhere, apart from probably in the attacking wide positions. And at fullback, it used to be the case. But so, yeah, goalkeeper looks pretty secure. Dave, who are you going for as the starter for the first game?
I think whatever way you look at it, for instance, you put Ramsdale in there, the first mistake that he could potentially have, that could really do him a lot of damage mentally. I actually think the best goalkeeper in terms of kind of shot stopping and just reliability, I agree with Miles. I think Nick Pope's been the best goalkeeper this season in the Premier League. Both Pickford and Ramsdale have both made mistakes. Pickford more than Ramsdale. But they're just, those two are better with their feet. And I think that's probably what just gets them in ahead of Nick Pope at this stage. I think purely, if I'm going to be safe, I'll probably just go with Pickford because, like I mentioned, he hasn't really let England down. He's got the experience of being in a major tournament and being the number one for England, and that could make a difference.
So a fairly predictable squad overall then. A few surprise names in there, but generally not too many surprises from what we expected Gareth Southgate to pick.
Most people would have thought you were going to talk about Jadon Sancho, and he wasn't even in the conversation for selection, really. All the talk was, is Maddison going to make it? Now, you talked about Southgate having players that he really consistently picks. Rashford didn't make the last squad, but managed to get himself back in time for the World Cup. Sancho didn't. What's happening there? It's so sad to me because I love Jadon Sancho.
Yeah, I think his time's not over though. He'll have his chance at the next Euros, no doubt. And there's a few players I think who will look at this World Cup that might have missed out and still go, do you know what, I've got a chance to make another squad once this is over. Whether that's with Southgate or not, we'll see. Depends what kind of tournament we have.
One of John's mates too probably feels the same. He looked to a shoe-in to make the World Cup after last season, didn't he? Where's Bowen, John?
Well, Southgate in international tournaments has done pretty well so far, so we have to trust what he's going to do and what he's going to produce, I think, for us. Even though this World Cup is at a really strange time of the season, I'm excited. I cannot wait. I'm going to get my head into the World Cup space now because that is it. It's among us. It's upon us, isn't it? So, yeah, really excited, guys. Hopefully you guys will stick around for more pods as the World Cup progresses because we're not going anywhere. In fact, we'll probably ramp up our pods a little bit more. So stick around for that. But thanks for your input, guys, and we'll speak to you soon. Cheers.